That's what I think. I think that if you look at the story of art, you'll notice that from the Roman period to the Christian period, there was a transformation in the way that the body was represented. And you can see that there's a use of all the Roman tropes, but transformed into a more sober vision of the human person, which focuses on the face, especially this encounter with the person, right? Because you encounter someone in their eyes, in their face, in their expression. And so you can see that that's where the art, towards what the art went. And then during the Renaissance, which I mean, this would be a big argument to have, but I think the Renaissance is a return to paganism, at least for a little moment. During the Renaissance, then there's this return to nakedness in art, and also a return to a lot of the pagan subjects, right? If you look at the way that Michelangelo represents God, it's basically Zeus, right? I mean, who is this figure? Like, who is this bearded guy? Like, I'm not sure who is this bearded guy that's touching Adam. Is it Christ? Like, who is it? Is it God?
It's God the Father.
It's the Father.
Right.
Yeah. So until then, like until the 14th century, God the Father was never represented in art.
Interesting. It's funny.
If so, like very, very freak events. But it's like during all the Middle Ages, the Father was never represented because you don't represent God.
Well, that's interesting. You know what's interesting is I heard Dr. William Lane Craig, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yep. He
was asked a question about iconography. And I've got my standard responses, right, to Protestants who tell me I'm not allowed to kind of depict things in heaven and earth. And it was interesting because he said that he gave one of the responses I've given, right? And he said, well, the second person of the Blessed Trinity in becoming man made an icon of himself. And so he can see an argument for that. But he holds to what you just said, that you shouldn't be making an icon of God the Father. But that's interesting because I'm in trouble if that is true, right? Because I belong to a tradition which does often depict God in that way.
Yeah, well, less and less. And even in the Orthodox tradition, if you look at starting in the 15th, 16th century, there starts to be images of God the Father that are represented. At first, they kind of try to fudge it by representing, they call him the Ancient of Days. And so they show the Ancient of Days, and then in the vision of Daniel where he gives his power to the Son of Man. And so they represent like Christ with white hair, and then also Christ as a child on his lap. So they try to fudge it, but then that figure of the Ancient of Days finally becomes God the Father, and they start representing God the Father in iconography. But now modern iconographers, I know almost no modern iconographer that represents God the Father. I could probably not even count them on one hand.
And what would you say the argument for that is?
The argument is
for why you shouldn't
still respect the second commandment. In the sense, we respect the notion that you cannot represent God but through Christ, because Christ is the image that God gave to us. And so we can see God in Christ, but we cannot see God directly outside of the Logos. Like, you can't see God the Father.
No.
Like, every theophany in the Old Testament is the Logos. Like, you even have this idea, for example, that when God says, I am the one that is, it's Christ. That's why in the halo of Christ, Orthodox people would often write the one that is, right?
Have it up there,
yeah. So the one who is basically saying, that vision that Moses had, that's what he saw. He saw Christ. He saw the divine Logos.
Huh. I'd have to think more about that. What about when Moses sees the back of God? Are you saying that's Christ too?
I mean, I would say
he hasn't become incarnate at this point, so why does it matter? Why do you have to say it's the Son?
Well, because the Son is the principle of manifestation of the Trinity, right? The Son is that by which all things are made, but it's ultimately also that by which all things appear, right? All the qualities, all the names, all come through the Son, and so all categories of existence are manifested through the Son.
What does that mean? All categories of existence. What does that mean?
That means that everything that exists is revealed or manifested through the Son.
Okay, I don't know what that means, manifested. Because I'm thinking of John 1, where it says nothing came to be except through him.
That's right.
But what does that mean?
That's a good way. That by him, so God created the world through the divine Logos. So the Logos, or the Word, is the means by which God reveals himself into creation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Say it again.
So let's use secular terms. So the infinite.
Remember that episode of The Office where Michael
Scott
Scott says, "Explain this to me like I'm 5." Just that's kind of what I'm
unbounded infinite that is beyond all category,
totally,
and beyond all name and 100%. All limit and all anything,
all comprehension. Yep,
all comprehension manifests himself through a concentrating point, a sun, like that he engenders, and that sun. No, and I'm not in secular talk anymore. I said I'm going to stay in secular talk, and then that's how. So it's like this. You can imagine the infinite, and then through the logos, then the world starts to manifest the categories. So the difference between Christianity and any other religion, because that idea is there in a lot of other traditions, but the difference is that we say that the logos is co-eternal with the Father, that we don't think that the divine logos is created. We think that the divine logos is uncreated, and therefore the world, creation, is called to participate in God because the way by which it's made is not lower than God. It's not like a lower stage than God. So when God speaks, it's him. And through his speech, then all things appear. So this idea, for example, so Christians could never have this idea that creation is bad, could never have this idea that creation in itself is fallen, because the means by which God creates is God.
Including the naked body.
Including the naked body. in a hierarchy of being.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to be a smartass. I was just saying, like, that's true, right? Because I mean, you do have like strands of Christians that, you know, speak of the body or speak of sex or speak of sexual desire in an anti-body way.
Well, for sure, there is a strand of Gnosticism, which is just always there in Christianity. This idea that the world is fallen in itself, that, like you said, the body is evil in itself, or that sexuality is evil in itself. Whereas the traditional way of understanding and the right way of understanding is that all things ultimately point to God if they're in their proper place. It's just about things being in the right place.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful, man. All right. Thank you. I have to listen to my own podcast and think that through again. That was really cool. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode. And I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors and to our amazing patrons for making all of this possible. Please do us a favor before you go. Click that subscribe button and then the bell. And that way YouTube will be forced to let you know every time we put out a new episode.